As a wordsmith and someone who's been writing since I was 6 years old, I wanted to write something for you tonight about my story going into treatments. Like so many of you here tonight, I am a member of Generation IVF. We grew up after the pill and the baby boomers had revolutionized women's reproductive choices and lives. We are also the generation that came of age at a time of burgeoning reproductive technologies and the trend to delay childbearing. Year after year, we were exposed to dazzling front-page stories heralding the marvels of test tube babies, frozen sperm, and egg donors. Stories that helped paint the illusion that we could forget about our biological clocks and have a happy family life after, not necessarily before or during, the workplace promotions. We had entered a new era, or so it seemed. Personally, I was grateful to be a woman in America at a time when social trends and science enabled me the luxury of later childbearing. It had afforded me the chance to heal childhood wounds and hone the life skills I thought I needed to be a confident, loving mother. Birth control was my best friend until the age of 40, when my maternal instincts finally began to surface and scream for attention. My mother had birthed me when she was 39, and since so many of my colleagues and peers were having their children in their late 30s and early 40s, not to mention all those celebrities Marnie mentioned, I thought I could do it too. I drank the Kool-Aid, as a friend of mine recently reminded me. After 2 years, when things did not progress and I was diagnosed with endometriosis, my husband and I did what so many couples in our generation did when they had trouble conceiving. We turned to fertility clinics for last-minute miracles. I still remember how nervous and excited we were the morning of our first appointment. I had enormous faith in modern medicine. It had saved the lives of 3 of my immediate family members from cancer. My sister twice, my father 3 times, and my mother once. But within minutes, that conviction was tested when the doctor explained that based on my age, it was highly unlikely that I would birth a baby naturally or with IVF. His words hit me like a solid punch to the solar plexus and sucked the air right out of my lungs. I glanced at my husband with tear-filled eyes and a guilty heart. I had dragged my feet on the question of babies, and now it seemed I had waded past the point of no return. Drowning in emotional pain and panic, we asked, statistically speaking, what do you think our chances are with IVF? They are very low, the doctor said, but it's really random. A successful pregnancy requires only 1 good egg. We just don't know. Those words of hope were all we needed to hear, steeped in a growing tidal wave of emotional denial, fear, and regret. We decided to roll the dice and gamble against the odds. We are not like other couples, we told ourselves over and over again like a mantra. We are different. Entering into the world of assisted reproductive technologies is a bit like traveling to another planet. The process challenged me to reassess everything I thought I knew about myself and the world. All the loose ends that took decades to tie into a nice, neat package called my life were suddenly untied again. Long-held beliefs about right and wrong began to flake off my psyche like old paint on a wind-blown house. Moral dilemmas about eugenics and cloning became common themes in my midnight dreams. I found myself actually considering what it might be like to create new life, not just in a petri dish, but also in a petri dish with someone else's eggs. Isolated from the world, I buried myself in a tomb of self-blame for getting us into this mess in the first place. As punishment, I closed my eyes to quiet warnings of possible cancers and detrimental side effects associated with certain fertility drugs, and I injected vial after vial into my abdomen, thigh, and buttock. Our first 2 IVF cycles failed, but the third resulted in a euphoric high, a blissful pregnancy that miscarried 7 weeks later, planting the seeds of what would later become a full-fledged, debilitating depression. Despite these crushing failures, our loyalty to the science remained so steady that we immediately signed up for a fourth cycle, we had officially crossed over into what I call the fertility junkie zone. We had switched to a different doctor by then, a younger one who was confident the new hormone protocol he prescribed for me would result in a jackpot harvest. That month, my ovaries produced no eggs at all. Our options for moving forward were now egg donation or adoption. More than any previous event in our lives, the notion of employing even more invasive technologies, introducing a third party into the sacredness of the conception process, challenged us to deeply investigate our core values and spiritual beliefs. This involved months of moral, philosophical, and ethical tugs of war about technology, the sanctity of life, and the commodification of women's reproductive tissue. Every night for months on end, I paced, sobbing in the early hours of the morning, trying to come to terms with our actions and addiction. Adoption would guarantee the spiritual path to parenting we both longed for, yet the seduction and hypnotic pull of the science still held us hostage. Despite the clinic's endorsement for egg donation, we battled individually and as a couple with its ethical nuances. Filled with grief, shame, and great trepidation, we chose to move forward with donor eggs. We spent the next few months literally shopping online for the perfect egg mother, all the while berating ourselves for our desperation and privileged, conspicuous consumption. We finally chose a blonde 21-year-old with a pleasant smile. A month before our 2 menstrual cycles were to be synchronized through hormone shots, the nurse called. "We can't allow you to use her eggs," she said matter-of-factly. "I shouldn't tell you this, but she has a genetic disease. She's actually infertile. She will never have children herself, poor thing." We were stunned, and I was almost hysterical. I had promised myself I would stop treatments when I was 45, and that birthday was fast approaching. We interpreted the news as an omen that we should leave nature alone, that we should end this obsession once and for all. But the momentum of our choices and our need to avoid the painful finality and futility of our all-consuming efforts swept us forward. Within a week, we had chosen another donor. This 28-year-old mother had helped another couple become pregnant 6 months earlier. We convinced ourselves that her unexpected arrival in our life was an omen too. The day before the scheduled embryo implantation, the doctor called. "I'm sorry to say that I don't have good news for you," he said. "None of her eggs fertilized. There is something obviously wrong. I would never recommend using her again, but I do hope you try another donor cycle. You are a perfect candidate."